And then it continues to stay low throughout the first half of the night, but then it also spikes in insomnia patients. I can't stay asleep.
We were talking about regularity, timing, and all these things, and quality and quantity. But one of the things I learned from your work is that that last hour is potentially the most important hour of me being in bed. And I say this in part because my girlfriend, she'd have about 6.5 hours sleep. She sleeps very, very well, perfect sleeper. But she'd always get up really, really, really early. And in part that was because of the guilt that I talked about. But I had a conversation with her about the guilt and I said, just stay in bed as long as you need to stay in bed. Like just have that extra 8th hour. And in part that's because I learned that the further we go in sleep, the more REM we're getting.
Yeah.
Okay, can you explain that to me with these 4 blocks? Why that last hour is particularly important and why we shouldn't be jumping out of bed or why we should be using certain sleep devices to wake us up when we're at the end of that last hour of REM?
Absolutely. So here we have the 4 blocks of sleep. So when we first fall asleep, we go into light, non-rapid eye movement sleep, stage 1. This is the stage of sleep that if I wake you up out of it, you say, I wasn't sleeping. Now, it's just that you're just in that transitional phase, this beautiful liminal state between the windows of wakefulness and true sleep. So this is your bridge between the waking world and the sleep world, and it doesn't last for very long, maybe just 10 or 15 minutes at tops. Then you get into the workhorse of sleep. This is stage 2 non-REM sleep. 50% of your night is spent in stage 2 non-REM sleep. I don't like the word light non-REM sleep. I've often used it, but it's not really, we do a lot of cognitive processing in stage 2 non-REM sleep. It's good stuff. It's not just the stage that you have to go through from sort of, deep non-REM sleep to go back to stage 2 in order for you to get to REM, but I'll come to that. So we have fallen asleep 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Now we're in stage 2 non-REM sleep. We'll stay there for about 15 or 20 minutes. Then if it's in the first couple of hours of the night, we go down into the very deepest stages of deep non-REM sleep. This is where the brainwave patterns slow down, but the brainwaves become incredibly big, huge, big, powerful, slow brainwaves. This is where you get an enormous amount of restoration, recovery of many of your major physiological systems.
So then, physical recovery.
Physical recovery, but mental too. It's during deep sleep that you take newly minted memories that you've learned and you hit the save button on those memories so that you don't forget. Deep sleep essentially is going to future-proof the information that you just learned today. It transfers information from a short-term storage vulnerable reservoir to a more permanent long-term storage site. It's during deep non-REM sleep when we have this communication. So think of those deep, powerful, slow brainwaves like long-wave radio station when you used to tune into a radio station in the car. You get huge ability for information transfer across long distances, across huge paths in the brain. It's amazing. So we've gone from light non-REM, then we go down into deep non-REM. We'll stay there for about 15 or 20 minutes. Then we'll start to rise back up again. We'll go back into stage 2 non-REM sleep.
Wait, we've gone from 1, 2, 3 to 2.
Yes. So we've gone, think about it more almost like a roller coaster ride. So we go from light non-REM and then we go down into stage 2 non-REM. Yeah. Then we go down into deep sleep and then we're going to rise back up into light stage 2 non-REM sleep. We're going to stay there and after about 70, 80 minutes, you're going to pop up and you'll have a short REM sleep period.
Oh, okay, like this.
And this is beautiful. So this is what we call a hypnogram.
I'll put this on the screen for anyone.
Lovely. So what I'm describing here is this roller coaster ride. So we've fallen asleep, light stage 1 non-REM, go down into stage 2, then you go down and you have a heavy period of deep non-REM slow wave sleep, stage 3. And that's what you see on your sleep tracker is deep sleep. This is light sleep, this is deep sleep. Stage 2 non-REM sleep, light sleep, stage 3 non-REM sleep, deep sleep. But then you'll start to climb back up and then you may pop up and you'll have a short REM sleep period here after about 70 or 80 minutes. So you'll have about 10 minutes of REM sleep and then back down you go again. You go down into non-REM sleep and then up into REM, down into non-REM sleep, and you'll go up into REM, down into non-REM sleep and up into REM. So what's interesting, however, is that the ratio of non-REM to REM changes. Now, there's a myth out there, and it's a bit of a problem. We humans have a 90-minute average non-REM to REM cycle. So we go down into non-REM sleep and then up into REM sleep every 90 minutes. Then we go back down into non-REM sleep and then up into REM sleep. So We go down into non-REM sleep and then up into REM in this 90-minute cycle. The problem is that it's on average 90 minutes. It ranges from 70 minutes to 120 minutes from one individual to the next. So, these devices that you may have seen tried to sort of, entrepreneurship, they say, I'm going to wake you up at the ideal moment in your 90-minute cycle. So that this thing that sits on my bedside, I tap it when the lights go out, and then it's going to go on its 90-minute cycle, and it's going to figure out the perfect moment to wake you up. It's nonsense, because my sleep cycle may be 75 minutes, yours may be 105 minutes. It's got no idea, because it's using a hard-coded 90-minute cycle. It's in some ways nonsense. We go down into non-REM sleep and up into REM sleep every 90 minutes. What changes, however, is the ratio of non-REM to REM within those 90-minute cycles as you move across the night, such that in the first half of the night, the majority of those 90-minute cycles are comprised of lots of deep non-REM sleep and very little REM sleep. But as you push through to the second half of the night, now that seesaw balance shifts over, and you spend much more of your time in REM sleep in the second half of the night, and particularly, just as you said, in the last 2 hours of the night. Why is this consequential? Well, just as you said, and you spoke about for your girlfriend, let's say that, I normally go to bed, for argument's sake, and I'm not saying this is the ideal time, but I go to bed at midnight to make the math easy, and I wake up at 8. But tomorrow, I've got to catch my flight back home. So I'm going to wake up 2 hours early. So I'm going to wake up at 6 rather than 8. I've lost 2 hours of sleep. So how much total sleep have I lost? Well, I've lost 25% of my total sleep. 2 hours of my 8 hours, 25%. Well, yes and no. I've lost 25% of my total sleep, but I may have lost 50, 60, 70% of all of my REM sleep. Why? Because REM sleep comes in the second half, and then particularly those last couple of hours of sleep. So that's why it's not just academic that you understand the sleep cycle relationship, but it's also pragmatic because it can impact the amount. In fact, the easiest way, if people said, how can I get more REM sleep? I would say just sleep 15 minutes later into the day than you normally would do. And you will disproportionately bias yourself towards getting significantly more REM sleep.
And why does REM sleep matter?
REM sleep is a brain state, firstly, that is incredibly active. In fact, some parts of the brain, particularly if I were to show you these deep emotional centers of the brain, pull this brain apart. So we've got these sort of deep emotional centers in the brain that sit, and in fact, they're more just underneath in here, tucked inside, just next to your brainstem at the top of it. And these emotional centers are called the amygdala, and you have one on the left and one on the right side of your brain. That part of the brain, together with a memory structure that runs alongside it called the hippocampus, those two parts of the brain form what we call the limbic system. And you may have heard of the limbic system, so the emotional centers of the brain. Those can be up to 40% more active when you're in dream sleep than when you're awake.
Dream sleep.
Dream sleep is rapid eye movement sleep.
REM sleep.
So REM sleep is the stage. Now, it depends on how you define dreaming. If you define dreaming as any mental activity reported upon awakening, then you dream in all stages of sleep, light non-REM sleep, deep REM sleep. So what would that sound like? Well, if I woke you up and said, Stephen, just tell me what was going through your head. And you said, well, I was just thinking about the next time you're going to come in and wake me up. That's just a dream thought. Most people think of dreams as the dreams that we have from REM sleep, from rapid eye movement sleep. That's why we call it dream sleep. Dreams from rapid eye movement sleep are florid, they're narrative. In fact, last night when you fell asleep and you went into dream sleep, you became incredibly psychotic.
Excuse me.
Before you reject my diagnosis of your nighttime psychosis, let me give you 5 good reasons. When you went into dream sleep last night, you started to see things which were not there. So you were hallucinating. Second, you believed things that couldn't possibly be true. So you were delusional. Third, you became confused about time, place, and person. So in psychiatry, we call that being disorientated. Fourth, you had wildly fluctuating emotions, something that we call being emotionally labile. You're all over the place. And then how wonderful, you and I, because I'll include myself now as being psychotic, you and I, we both woke up this morning and we forgot most, if not all, of that dream experience. So we're suffering from amnesia. If you were to experience any one of those 5 symptoms whilst you're awake, you'd be seeking some degree of psychological help. But for reasons that we're only now understanding, it seems to be a normal biological and psychological process. So what are the reasons why we dream? We dream for at least 2 different reasons. The first reason is emotional first aid. REM sleep is what I've defined as overnight therapy. And it's during dream sleep where your brain takes difficult, painful emotional experiences and it acts like a nocturnal soothing balm. And it just takes the sharp edges off those difficult, painful experiences so that you come back the next day and you have a memory of an emotional event, but it's no longer emotional. You don't have that same visceral regurgitation of that same emotional charge. Why is REM sleep able to do this overnight therapy, this depotentiation? Why is REM sleep able to sort of strip the bitter emotional rind from the informational orange, as it were? The reason is the following. Dream sleep, REM sleep, is the only time during the 24-hour period where the brain shuts off a stress-related neurochemical called noradrenaline. Now, you've heard of the sister chemical downstairs in your body called adrenaline. Well, upstairs in the brain, we don't have adrenaline, we have noradrenaline. REM sleep is the only time where it's completely shut off. And what we put forward is a theory called overnight therapy, where your brain has, as I told you, these emotional centers and these memory centers, the emotional centers, the amygdala, the memory centers, the hippocampus. You reactivate those structures when you go into dream sleep. So your brain gets the chance to reactivate and replay and reprocess emotional experiences. However, it's doing it in a quote unquote safe neurochemical environment because that stress chemical of noradrenaline is completely shut off. So it's the ideal neurochemical therapy for stripping the emotion from the memory. And we put forward a theory that perhaps the quintessential disorder where this fails is PTSD.